The mood tracker rolls on, and we're headed up to Happy Valley, and we're going to State College, Pennsylvania, and it is Penn State mood tracker night, and I did not appreciate how complex this situation is. Producer Jesse is a Penn State grad, and I asked him today, Jesse, we're doing Penn State tonight, what's your mood? And then you just see the bubbles, and there's bubbles, and there's bubbles, and it's like, Jesse, I just want 4 or 5 words. Why are you typing this much? And he ended up telling me, look, it's very complicated. So I went over to Lions247.com. Surely these folks will make sense of this for me. And I said, I'm talking about it on the show tonight. Look, I need your honest, sage opinion. What is the mood here? How are you feeling? 5 words or less about Penn State. Then I went to the gym. And I came back, and what I expected was, I expected 10 or 15 responses. I get back, and I go to the Penn State board. I'm actually pulling it up right now. There are 100 responses to this, about 5,000 views, and we are several pages deep on this thread. We are 4 pages deep on this thread right now. And what I have come to realize is it's so complex because it's fragmented. The mood around Penn State football right now is fragmented, not divided. I didn't say divided, because if I were to tell you it's divided, that would be the classic Camp A versus Camp B. We've got like 14 camps here. There are several different moods around Penn State football, so it's fragmented. But I want to be very careful with how I state that. There aren't very many people who are bailing on the program. It's not like that. It's not a bunch of James Franklin on the hot seat. It's not a bunch of, oh, we're screwed. I'm just going to give up and I'll come back, in better days, brighter days. It's not like that. They're just varying degrees of hope. There's some jaded sides of things. There's some eternal optimistic side of things, but it's just fragmented. So here's what it sounds like. If you do not have access to this thread, subscribe to 247sports.com and go check it out. But if you don't, I'll just tell you, I'll just sum it up. You got several camps. One of the camps would sound like this. One of the camps would say, you need to have some perspective here, because it's very obvious. If we do nothing more than go back to the Iowa game this past year and Sean Clifford, our quarterback, doesn't get hurt, we win that game. If they win the Iowa game, they're 6-0. They go into the bye week. They come out of the bye week, their remaining schedule would be Illinois. I have a sneaking suspicion they don't lose that game if Clifford's not hurt. At Ohio State, at Maryland, Michigan, Rutgers, at Michigan State. They go from 7-5, which is what they actually ended with, to what? 10-2? And at that point, you're celebrating the season, and all you did was change one injury. Quarterback, big position. But one camp would say, listen, the reality is we just suffered some bad luck this past year. But then there's another camp that would come in, and they'd say, well, it's not like we disagree with you wholeheartedly, but you're not telling the whole story there. And Camp A would say, okay, what do you mean? They'd sit back, put their pipe in their mouth. And then Camp B would say, well, did you watch Georgia football this year, for example? And Camp A would say, yeah, what are you getting at? Camp B says, well, Georgia lost JT Daniels, who was their starting quarterback. They never saw him again. He never came back. And they took the backup, who's a former walk-on, and they kind of won a national championship with him. And then Camp A would say, yeah, I watched the game. What's your point? And Camp B would say, why didn't we have our quarterback situation figured out? Like, did it never occur to anyone, Sean Clifford could get hurt one day. And then when he gets hurt, we don't have anything. Then Camp C, who's kind of sitting over here as an innocent, neutral bystander so far, they say, wait a second. Now, I got something to say about that. And Camp C comes in and says, we kind of did have our quarterback situation set up, but then the evil transfer portal came along, and it snatched Will Levis, our backup, from us, and he ended up being the starting quarterback down at Kentucky. And so is it really all that fair to criticize the coaching staff? Because even though they did technically have the quarterback situation figured out, how many teams out there can afford to lose their backup and then have their starter go down and still just cruise merrily along? And then Camp D would come in. We're only 4 camps deep. There's like 10 more to go. I'm not going to list them all. But Camp D would come in, and it would sound something like this. And this is the camp that wants to sound high and mighty and probably intellectually above the room, even though they're making good points. And they would say, look, quarterback hurt or not, were we really going to win the Big Ten this year? I mean, our offensive line was very suspect. Our running back play was very suspect. We had Jahan Dotson out there and couldn't get him the ball half as much as we should have gotten it to him. But I want to ask this. How serious are we really about this whole thing? I mean, it's not like our facilities and infrastructure situation just magically vanished because we had James Franklin sign a new piece of paper here. And I'll go this far too. Camp D would say, you ever heard of NIL? How serious are we about that? How committed are the powers that be around here to really putting our best foot forward when it comes to staying at the forefront of the evolutionary aspects of this game? Are the right people ready to step up there? And so it would go on and on and on and on. And you would have some people say, look, I guess we know what our ceiling is until we get quarterback figured out. And then you'd have another camp that says, look, I mean, I trust our coaching staff to get good players in here. I don't know that we have the best tacticians on game day. And then you'd have another camp that says, how would you ever know that? We would have been 6-0 and set up for a second half run with our current setup if our quarterback hadn't gone down. It's not like the coaching staff got him injured. It would never end. I've got evidence because I'm looking at this thread right now. Even as we're live, there are people posting in this thread. It's never ending. But it's got to end sooner or later. We got to get things figured out sooner or later. Here's the one commonality that everyone has. Everyone understands whether you're in camp A, B, 4, 9, 12, 13, or 18. They always say, but I really hope Drew Allar's the guy at quarterback. And that is, I think, some middle ground that we can all come to. It's the first 5-star quarterback they've brought on campus since a guy named Christian Hackenberg. Seems like a long time ago. It really wasn't all that long ago. Sean Clifford has announced he's going to come back. That was met with a collective, okay, literally a yawn. Producer Jesse is all in on the Drew Allar 22 campaign. I don't know if he's going to be ready to play this year or not, but he is a guy who there is immense amounts of hope for the future of Penn State football riding on his shoulders. And a lot of people are fully invested. I mean, I don't disagree with that. I really hope they get it figured out. They're going to have to probably get production from a couple of young tailbacks this year. Offensive line has no choice but to get better. But Penn State, it's fragmented. It's not divided, fragmented. There are very few bailing, but there are also very few people who are thrilled with the way things look right now. So we'll see. Very fragmented. And I don't know when we do the post-spring update that it's going to have changed a whole lot. But I was not ready for how complex and how layered the mood tracker ended up being for Penn State today. Because if you ask me to repeat what I just said, I think I just have to start all over from scratch and just scroll through this thread again.